Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said, not tonight, for the 8th time. Same tone, same practice smile, same way of closing her laptop like that was supposed to end the conversation. I just stood there for a second, looking at the soft glow from her iPhone lighting her face. She was scrolling through Instagram Reels, laughing quietly at something I wasn't part of. I'd stopped asking why a long time ago. We used to meet halfway. Now it felt like I was living with a guest who kept forgetting my name. I made dinner that night, grilled chicken, a couple of sides from Target, candles on the table. She didn't even notice. You don't have to try so hard, she said, her eyes still on the screen. That sentence hit harder than any argument could have. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded and went to the balcony. The city lights below looked peaceful, detached, exactly what I wanted to feel. I stood there for a long time, listening to the dull hum of traffic and the faint sound of her typing again. That sound had replaced our conversations. When she finally went to bed, I stayed up, scrolling through hotel listings on my MacBook. Nothing dramatic, no plan for revenge, no message to make her feel guilty. I just wanted silence. A different kind of silence, one that didn't feel like rejection. I booked a room at a Marriott downtown, a simple place, nothing fancy. Packed a few things, jeans, shirts, my laptop, a charger. Left the toothbrush she'd bought me from Walmart last Christmas. Somehow, that felt symbolic. Before leaving, I looked at her one last time. She was asleep, phone on the pillow, face turned away. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel ignored. I felt still. The air outside was cool, November kind of cool, where every breath feels clean. I got in my Ford F-150 and drove without music, just the sound of tires against the wet road. When I reached the hotel, I didn't check my phone. I didn't text her. I didn't even turn on the lights. I lay down on the bed, and the silence felt like a reward. The room smelled faintly of coffee and detergent. My chest felt light, empty but calm. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., her name flashed on the screen, then disappeared. No message. No, where are you? Just a missed call, like muscle memory. I turned the phone face down. For the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. I woke up before sunrise. The blinds were half open, and the light from the parking lot cut through the room in clean, quiet lines. I hadn't slept like that in years. Deep, undisturbed, dreamless. For the first time, I didn't wake up to her sighing or scrolling through her phone beside me. There was no noise, just stillness. I made coffee from the little Keurig by the TV, black, no sugar. The bitterness grounded me. The world felt distant, like I'd stepped outside my own life for a moment. I opened my laptop, checked a few work emails, the usual mess of Slack notifications and project updates. My mind worked like it always did, methodically calm. But something had shifted. I didn't care about rushing back. By 8 a.m., I knew she'd noticed I was gone. She always noticed when her control slipped. She didn't text, though, not yet. She'd wait, the same way she'd wait out my silences before. She believed silence was her weapon. What she didn't know was that I'd learned to use it better. Around noon, I went out. There was a Starbucks next to the hotel, and I sat there with my laptop, pretending to work. I watched people come and go, strangers laughing, couples arguing softly, someone crying quietly over a muffin. I'd forgotten what real emotion looked like when it wasn't filtered through a screen. Her first text came at 12:43 p.m. You didn't come home last night. No question mark. Just a statement, like she was documenting a fact. The next one followed 5 minutes later. At least tell me you're okay. I stared at it, felt nothing, and put the phone face down. I wasn't angry, just done. That afternoon, I went for a drive. The city looked different from behind the windshield. I passed by the Target we used to go to every Sunday, the one where she'd spend an hour comparing candles and then ignore me for the rest of the day. I remembered thinking how peaceful she looked in those aisles, like that was her real life, not the one with me. I pulled over near the old bridge and just sat there, watching the water. My reflection in the glass didn't look broken. It looked empty in a clean way, like I'd finally stopped fighting something invisible. When I got back to the hotel, there were 3 missed calls, 1 voice message. I didn't listen. I turned off notifications, closed the curtains, and lay back on the bed. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt earned. The second night away felt different. Not lighter, sharper, like the air had more edges to it. I wasn't used to being unreachable. Every part of me had been conditioned to respond, to check in, to fix things before they fell apart. But that night, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't even want to. I ordered takeout from a small diner near the hotel, pancakes and black coffee. Simple. The kind of meal that didn't need conversation. While waiting, I scrolled through my messages. Not hers, but old ones. Years of small dismissals disguised as jokes, delayed replies that said more than words. You're too serious. You worry too much. Can't you just let things go? I let them go now, all of them. By morning, I'd stopped checking my phone entirely. I could almost hear the echoes of my apartment in my head. The sound of her heels, her typing, the tone she used when she said she was too tired. It wasn't about exhaustion. It was about control. Every "not tonight" was a brick in the wall she built between us. She got used to me waiting on the other side. I went for a walk downtown, letting the noise of traffic fill the silence. There was a man playing guitar near the entrance of a Walmart, singing something soft and broken. I dropped a few dollars in his case and kept walking. For some reason, his voice stayed with me longer than hers ever did. Around noon, a notification flashed across the screen, her name again. Just 2 words, "We need to talk." I stared at them for a while, then deleted the thread without opening it. Not out of anger, but clarity. Talking had become her way of resetting control, not connection. Later that day, I got a call from Ben, a guy I used to work with. He asked if everything was okay. Said she'd mentioned online that I'd needed space. It was strange. Even now, she couldn't just say I left. She had to rewrite it into something that made her look composed. That was her skill, curating emotions for an audience. That evening, I watched the sun go down from the hotel window. The light cut through the skyline, soft but certain. I realized something simple. Peace doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't demand proof. It just exists when you stop feeding chaos. When I finally turned off the lights and lay down, the city outside was buzzing, alive. My world wasn't smaller, it was just quieter. And in that quiet, I finally recognized myself again. On the 3rd day, she finally called from a different number. I recognized her voice before she spoke. It was flat, careful, the kind of tone people use when they're trying not to sound nervous. She said she just wanted to know if I was safe. Not if I was happy. Not if I was okay. Just safe. Like I was some missing file she couldn't locate. I didn't answer. I let the voicemail play in silence, her voice echoing through the hotel room, small and distant. I spent most of that morning walking through the city with my phone on airplane mode. I went into a Best Buy just to look at things I didn't need. Headphones, keyboards, monitors, tools of noise. I thought about how our whole relationship had become like that. Gadgets, updates, routines, all perfectly functional, but missing the point of connection. By afternoon, I sat in the truck with the windows down, parked by the old river trail. It was strange how fast I adapted to solitude. The first night felt like escape. The 3rd felt like home. I checked my email once, then closed it. She had sent one message with the subject line, "We should talk before this gets worse." I deleted it without reading the rest. That evening, I ordered takeout again and watched the news on mute. The room was dim, quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. I realized how much I'd underestimated silence. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt organized, calm. There was no tension waiting behind the next word, no expectation. Just the rhythm of my own breathing. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were missed calls from her, her sister, even one from her boss, probably her way of signaling that I was overreacting. The pattern was predictable. She was trying to rebuild the story in her favor. He's distant. He's under stress. Anything but the truth, that she'd push me away one, "not tonight," at a time until there was nothing left to reach for. I poured myself a glass of water, turned off the TV, and stood by the window. The city looked exactly the same, but I didn't. I could feel it, the shift. The man who always waited, always explained, was gone. What replaced him wasn't bitter or angry, just done. When I went to sleep that night, I didn't dream of her. I didn't dream of anything, just silence. And for the first time, it didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. By the 4th day, I stopped checking the clock. Time had become something soft, flexible, almost meaningless. I woke up late, walked down to the Starbucks near the corner, and watched people rush past me. Everyone seemed to be chasing something: schedules, validation, someone else's attention. I was done chasing. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, scrolling through nothing, feeling the quiet pulse of being unreachable. Her name popped up again that morning. A text, then another. "Can we meet?" Followed by, "Please don't make this worse than it has to be." The phrasing told me everything. It wasn't about us. It was about optics, the narrative she could still control. I put the phone back in my pocket and let it buzz until it stopped. Around noon, I drove to the edge of town. The road stretched wide and empty, sunlight bouncing off the hood of my car. I parked near a small hardware store, Home Depot, and sat there for a while, watching people come and go with their small plans and weekend projects. Everyone looked grounded in something, even if it was just a list of things to fix. I envied that simplicity. I wasn't running anymore. I was studying the silence, dissecting it, learning its rhythm. The longer I stayed away, the more I realized she never wanted partnership. She wanted presence, someone to stand still while she moved. I'd filled that role too perfectly. I was the pause between her highs, the quiet in her noise. But silence only works when both people hear it. That evening, I finally opened one of her messages. It wasn't emotional, it was logistics. "We need to figure out bills. The apartment. Your stuff." Practical, detached, efficient. She was still managing the breakup like a campaign. I typed a short reply. "I'll handle my end." Nothing more. Then I turned off my phone again. Back at the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of the AC and the low traffic outside. The peace wasn't new anymore. It was normal. That scared me in a strange, beautiful way. To feel at home in solitude meant I'd finally stopped needing her to notice me. I looked at my reflection in the dark TV screen. The same face, but quieter. There was no anger left. Just space. And I knew, deep down, that space was never something she could survive in. On the 5th day, the silence finally started to spread. I hadn't expected it to reach other people, but it did. Her friend Melissa called me in the afternoon, her voice awkward, too casual for the question she wanted to ask. She said she'd seen my car parked near downtown and wondered if I was doing okay. I told her I was fine. I could hear the hesitation in her tone, like she wanted to ask more, but didn't dare. I knew why. It wasn't concern. It was curiosity. The quiet between us had started to make her uncomfortable too. That evening, I went out for dinner alone, a quiet place near the river. I took a seat at the bar, ordered grilled salmon and another black coffee. Across the room, a couple was laughing, not loud, but free. I realized how long it had been since I'd seen laughter without performance. Everything in my old life had been edited, polished, filtered for effect. She used to do that even in real time, change her tone depending on who was watching. I paid the bill and walked outside into the cold. The city lights reflected off the river like broken glass. My phone buzzed again, her name. This time I let it ring, then turned it off completely. She wasn't used to being ignored. That was the real fracture forming now. The next morning, Ben texted again. "She's asking around about you. Seems worried." I almost laughed. Worry wasn't her language. What she felt wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing control over the story. People were starting to notice. That was her weak spot. For her, appearances weren't just a priority. They were survival. I spent the rest of the day in my hotel room, answering work emails and watching a movie on Netflix, something mindless and slow. I didn't move much. Didn't feel the need to. The world was quiet, manageable, predictable. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. Later that night, I thought about the last time she'd looked at me without calculation. It was months ago, probably a Sunday. We'd been grocery shopping at Walmart, and she'd leaned on the cart, smiling at nothing in particular. Back then, that smile felt real. Now I realized it wasn't for me. It was for herself, for the image she'd built. That memory didn't hurt. It just felt distant, like an old movie I'd stopped believing in. I turned off the light and let the dark settle in. Somewhere out there, she was unraveling. Not because I'd left, but because I'd done it quietly. By the end of the week, the quiet had turned into something heavier. It wasn't absence anymore, it was gravity. Every hour I stayed away, her version of control cracked a little more. I didn't need to see it. I could feel it through the static. The messages stopped coming one by one. No more questions, no more logistics. Just silence, the same kind she used to weaponize. Only now, it was turning against her. I spent that Friday working from my laptop at a coffee shop near the hotel. The same Starbucks I'd been going to all week. The barista had started to remember my order: tall black coffee, no sugar, no talk. It was strange how quickly new routines replaced old ones. The noise around me was calm, detached, and I realized something simple but final. She was no longer the center of my thoughts. I'd built my days without her name in them. That afternoon, I saw her post something on Instagram. A photo of the apartment, the same one I'd left untouched. She'd cleaned everything, rearranged the furniture, added a caption: "Fresh starts are hard but necessary." I didn't react, but deep down, I understood what that post really was: a flare shot into the sky, begging someone to notice the story she wanted to tell. I ordered another coffee and watched people come and go. Everyone looked busy, tethered to something. I wasn't tethered to anyone anymore. The realization didn't feel lonely. It felt precise, like I'd finally stepped out of a storm and could hear my own breathing again. That night, I drove past the apartment. The lights were on. Her car was in the driveway. For a moment, I almost stopped. Habit, not love, just the ghost of routine. I parked a block away, watched from a distance. Through the window, I could see her pacing, phone in hand, hair tied up. The calm expression she wore in public was gone. She was calling someone, maybe her sister, maybe no one who could help. That's when I knew the silence had done its work. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't text. I just sat there for a while, then drove back to the hotel. The city was quiet, the streets half empty. I realized the peace I'd found wasn't about being alone. It was about being untouchable. For years, she'd controlled me with denial. Now, I was teaching her what real absence felt like. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the hotel room floor, sharp and pale. It had been a full week since I left. No contact, no explanation. The silence had matured into something powerful, almost strategic. I hadn't planned it this way, but distance had become its own kind of language, one she couldn't speak. I made coffee, checked my email, and caught a message from my manager asking if I could extend my remote work setup. I agreed immediately. The thought of going back, of sitting across from her like nothing had happened, felt impossible. I didn't hate her. I just didn't believe in the version of us that she'd tried to maintain, the one polished enough for her friends, but hollow behind closed doors. By noon, I went for a drive outside the city, no destination in mind. The road curved past empty fields and construction zones. It felt honest out there, quiet, raw, without filters. I stopped by a small diner and ate alone, pancakes again, the kind that came with too much syrup and burned edges. Across the counter, a couple in their 60s sat in silence, but it wasn't the kind that hurt. It was the kind that said everything had already been said. I envied that peace. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Ben again. His voice was careful. He said she'd come by the office looking for me, pretending it was about something work-related. People noticed, he said. They could tell she was unraveling. I didn't respond. I just listened. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was closure. Her world had always depended on keeping everything composed, appearing untouchable. Now the cracks were visible, and she couldn't hide them. That evening, I returned to the hotel and stood by the window, watching the city glow under the early evening haze. Somewhere out there, she was probably still talking, spinning reasons, rewriting timelines, trying to make sense of my silence. But the truth was simpler than she'd ever admit. I hadn't left because I stopped caring. I left because I couldn't survive in a place where care was one-sided. Before bed, I looked at the phone one last time. No messages, no missed calls, just quiet. The kind that doesn't ache anymore. It just exists. I turned off the lights and lay there, realizing she was finally learning the lesson I never needed to teach. The absence of noise speaks louder than any goodbye ever could. By the 8th day, the silence had turned into a mirror. Everything she had tried to hide behind her calm voice and perfect posture was now reflecting back at her. I didn't need to see it to know. People had stopped asking about me. They started asking about her. The image she'd built so carefully was starting to crumble, and for once, it wasn't because of anything I said or did. It was because I'd finally stopped reacting. I went for a walk that morning, the air sharp and clean. It felt like the world was resetting itself. I grabbed a black coffee from Starbucks and sat on a bench near the park. My phone stayed in my pocket, silent. For years, I'd lived inside the noise. Her constant notifications, the small corrections, the emotional games dressed up as conversations. Without them, I realized how much space peace actually took up. Later that day, I stopped by the old apartment. Not to go in, just to see it from the outside. The curtains were drawn. Her car wasn't there. I wondered if she'd gone to stay somewhere else, maybe at a friend's, maybe just trying to escape the echo of her own silence. I imagined her pacing the living room, glancing at her phone, wondering when I'd finally break. But that version of me, the one who always came back, didn't exist anymore. When I turned to leave, I saw the neighbors outside, talking quietly. One of them nodded in my direction, like he knew. Not the details, but the truth. Some things don't need to be explained. Absence tells its own story. That night, I sat in my hotel room, lights off, window open to the hum of traffic below. I thought about the first time she said, "Not tonight." It wasn't cruel. It was casual, forgettable. But that's how erosion works. Not in one blow, but in tiny moments that go unnoticed until there's nothing left to hold on to. My phone lit up again around midnight. Her name, one more time. No words, just her name. I watched it glow, then fade, then disappear. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. The next morning, I packed my bag. Not because I was running, but because I was done staying still. There was nothing to return to. Only the quiet satisfaction of knowing she was finally feeling the emptiness she'd once taught me to live with. The morning I left the hotel, the sky was pale gray, like the world hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I packed slowly, folding everything with a kind of precision I hadn't felt in months. My phone stayed silent on the table. No messages, no calls. Just a single unread voicemail I had no intention of opening. The piece was complete now, almost surgical. I checked out, loaded my bag into the car, and drove without direction. The streets were empty, washed clean by an early drizzle. I passed the same Target we used to shop at, the one where she'd spend half an hour comparing scented candles while I waited, pretending it mattered. It was strange how familiar places lose their weight once the person attached to them disappears from your mind. Around noon, I stopped by the river, the same spot where I'd parked nights ago to think. The air was cool, and the water moved slow, reflecting a soft, broken light. I stood there for a while, realizing how quiet my thoughts had become. There was no anger left, no bitterness, no desire to explain myself. Only calm, the kind that doesn't come from winning, but from finally stepping out of the game entirely. I thought about her then, not with regret, but with distance. I knew she was probably back at the apartment now, sitting in the silence she used to use against me. I could picture her trying to fill it with noise, music, calls, scrolling through her phone, but none of it would work. Because silence, once it turns on you, doesn't let go. It stays. It whispers everything you tried not to hear. As the wind shifted, I took one last look at the water and smiled, just slightly. Not because it was over, but because it no longer needed to be anything else. My story didn't end with a confrontation or an apology. It ended with space, with peace, with the quiet understanding that sometimes walking away isn't escape, it's evolution. I got back in the car, started the engine, and drove. The city stretched out ahead, endless, indifferent, alive. I didn't look back. The world didn't feel smaller anymore. It felt precise. And as the last trace of her voice faded from my memory, I understood the truth I'd been circling since that first, "Not tonight." I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.